What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Who all saw that incredible podcast last night with Don Murphy? What'd you think? Pretty cool, to say the least. Well, that was yesterday, and now it's today. Here Monday, brand new week. Here we are, all set for the latest Trade To Black podcast. All right, happy Monday. Good to see you, gents. Let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varell. Good to see you. Happy Monday.
Good to see you. How's it going?
Good to see you. Guap, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. Happy to be in the new look show here. Mitch has been working hard, so you'll notice everything accented by our favorite color, green.
What do you think of that? This beautiful color green that's surrounding us. It's pretty sharp, is it not?
Yes.
Nice
Yeah,
applaud to
great.
Mitch for
Pops.
putting this together. This is 2 months in the making, but man, this is a lot of work. It looks pretty simple, but there's a lot of programming that goes on the back end. So let us know what you think of our new look as we welcome you in here on a Monday, the TDR Trade To Black podcast. Let's get things going. Segment number 1, Into the Wire, highlighting the biggest headlines in cannabis. Kind of a slower day, but let's focus north of the border in Canada, where the Canadian cannabis landscape involving the Canadian government appointing a panel of experts that will analyze the entire Canadian cannabis landscape as a whole. It's a pretty big announcement to digest, Anthony. So can you dive into what I mean by this, and more importantly, why it's important for our viewers to be aware of?
Yeah, so this is big. This is an 18-month review of the Canadian cannabis industry. It's been live for obviously several years now. There were 54 key takeaways or recommendations from this report. Not going to go over all of them, as that'd be far too long. We'd have to have probably a couple episodes on that. But there were some that I definitely found interesting. One of them being Shoppers Drug Mart was actually lobbying to get medical cannabis products sold through pharmacies, which is something that the panel took into account, and that was one of their recommendations. Another was to maintain the 10 milligram edible dosage. This was kind of a contentious issue, as they believe that having higher concentrated edibles will eventually start to take more and more share away from the illicit market. I don't know if I agree on that. Maybe you need like RSO or something that's high strength as a true medical product, but edibles from an adult use perspective, 10 milligrams, it's fine, sufficient for a consumer focused product. You need some sort of limits on this kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that I found from this, and the reason why I think the Canadian LPs have been rallying and wanted to bring this up, was the language around the current excise tax. Right now, the excise tax is pretty onerous on the Canadian LPs, and it's variable. It's either $1 CAD or a certain percentage from an effective tax rate, which can be up to 30% of a tax. This recommendation, and after the audit, they're implying or recommending to get it down to like a flat 10% excise tax. This would fundamentally alter the LPs. They'd be getting a tax break. This would be something long overdue, as the variability around that excise tax has been something that's been debated for years now. Also, it was implemented when the cost of cannabis to the consumer was a lot higher. As we all know, the cost of cannabis at retail in Canada has dropped, and the formula that this tax is calculated on hasn't been readjusted. It's about time to readjust that down to where the market currently is at, and that could be a big win for LPs moving forward.
So this whole, I guess, review is actually a good thing for the LPs. Why do you think this was the decision was made now? Because as you said, this was something that's been in the works for 18 months.
So it's an 18-month review. We're sitting in the third month of 24, meaning this probably happened Q4 22. Sounds about right. Canada had 5 years to operate, roughly. Then they evaluate and they not fix it, but they evaluate, they make changes, and they go from there. This is a sensible approach to the cannabis industry. This is great to see. I'm sure that we're going to see things like this take place in the United States as we march farther and farther along. And this was much needed. Most of it looks like it's going to be constructive recommendations and ways to improve the Canadian cannabis experience, not only for the operators but also for the consumers.
Yeah, Guap, I see you applauding over there. You're obviously in a full agreement with this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag, but net positive. Specifically, the 10% excise tax portion. The government of Canada is not the only, dare I say, company that should be making money in Canada. So I'm sure the
Right.
LPs are applauding. And this also should help. I mean, it remains to be seen how it all trickles down, but if prices came down to the consumer a little bit, some companies started being a little more profitable and sustainable, that all helps combat the black market or illicit market as well. So net positive up in Canada.
Indeed. Well, we'll watch this closely. Let's jump in now to headline number 2. Involves the UN and the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, where 70% of the Commission's 53 members voted on a resolution. This is a big story, Guap. When I look at this, clearly the war on drugs is not working and has not worked for quite some time. But what's your opinion on this and what this potentially mean for the cannabis industry?
Yeah, typically Vienna does not take votes, right? So this was notable just from that perspective. Also, it just feels like by making this vote, the UN is recognizing that prohibitionist kind of war on drugs type of approach isn't working. That harm reduction was the key word here. Cannabis can be part of the solution there. Cannabis was not mentioned in the documentation here specifically, but it
Yeah.
just signals to me and to the world that the UN is willing to move forward and take a pretty giant leap forward in terms of how they view drugs in general, and that could trickle down to cannabis. It may have some ramifications. I'm not a international commerce lawyer. We should bring on one, but it could have some ramifications with treaties and some of the conflicts that people were worried about when we talk about exporting cannabis from North America. So it doesn't clear it all up, but it is a nice strong signal from the UN that they're willing to progress in their views towards drugs, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see the attention that the industry is getting everywhere from a political standpoint over the last 2-3 weeks, which is kind of the stuff that we talked about with Don Murphy in the US. But this brings it to a whole new level when the UN is actually reviewing it now, right?
Yeah, I mean
it's great to
big.
see. It's
Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say it's great to see because this treaty's been brought up a bunch of times when we talk about rescheduling. Germany kind of threw caution to the wind. They didn't really take much heed to the treaty. That's in line with controlled substances and how everyone signed on with the UN. The fact that they're starting to reform drug policy, wanting to loosen up regulations around drug policy and take a different approach to drug policy, I think ultimately will have implications on this treaty. And then that will not be a talking point for the opposition anymore to rescheduling.
That would be interesting. I never looked at it that way. Well,
Yeah.
I thought that was a great interview, great conversation that we had with Don, obviously. I'm not sure if we got some great feedback based off of that, but wow, really opened up my eyes. And thought it was interesting in the point when he said that Blumenauer crossed the line in his speech when he talked about maybe wanting to get the younger vote for the current administration. But that was appealing and very interesting to hear because, I think that really was a big takeaway that I thought was interesting, but it was great to hear, Don to say that he crossed the line and stuck his neck out. But something that I think every single cannabis investor or people following the space are saying amen to what he said, knowing that this is a long time coming for the actual space. But all in all, this is good with the UN as well. But let's now focus on topic number 3 here at Into the Wire. Don't forget, everybody, please, if you can, smash that like button, leave lots of comments below as we continue to build out this space. It's a Monday here, the TDR Trade to Black podcast, here with Anthony Varel along with Guap. And next up is, the countdown is on for both the state of Florida and Virginia, and whether or not adult use cannabis will be included on the voting ballot for the upcoming election this fall. Anthony, first up, we focus on the state of Florida. What should our viewers be paying attention to pertaining to that state this week?
11 a.m. on Thursday, the recommendations and the talking points from the Florida Supreme Court come out. If there is nothing on there that is rejecting the notion of the adult use ballot initiative going onto the ballot in November, then it is safe to say and assume that the clock is going to expire and that ballot initiative is going to automatically go onto the ballot. Obviously, Friday's a federal holiday, being an Easter holiday, so 11 a.m. on Thursday is pretty much the deadline if we're going to see something that's going to accept or reject it officially from the Supreme Court.
You wonder how
the clock's gonna expire.
Yeah. Well, you wonder how Thursday afternoon some of these U.S. cannabis companies that are situated in Florida will perform if there is no news. But I'm assuming that based on what you're saying is a lot of the sentiment in the industry that the shot clock is indeed going to run out. But Thursday, 11 a.m., be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't think stocks are going to move on this. I think if anything, the only thing that they would do is go down if the adult use initiative was rejected. But I mean, just because the adult use initiative is now going to get on the ballot, by no way, shape, or form is this automatic. Is it going to happen? And do I think it should actually cause price appreciation in stocks? I mean, you've got a long way to go. We got to break the 60% threshold. You got implementation. It's going to be challenged. I mean, this will fundamentally alter those businesses if and when this is put into practice, which at the earliest is July 2025. So, I mean, I'm not trading this based on any kind of headline. I wouldn't recommend anybody trading this on any kind of headline. Is it a net positive for the Florida companies that have exposure? Absolutely. Is it a step in the right direction? Sure. But I mean, I don't think anybody should be speculating that these are going to go up simply because the ballot initiative is actually going to the ballot come November.
This industry loves their headlines, though, don't they?
Yeah. I have a different take. I think, I've seen weirder stuff happen right in this space. It's big news. I think Anthony in his home state of Florida, he knows it really well, and he's protecting himself just like I'm protecting myself with North Carolina and Virginia all the time. We never know what people are going to glob onto for a headline, and going onto the ballot in November, that's a nice headline that's going to be out there. So here's hoping that some stocks with Florida exposure go up a whole lot that day.
Yeah, well, next up. Let's focus on your state, Virginia. What's the timeline for that state and what we can expect? It's April 8th, if I'm correct. Right, Guap?
Yeah, April 8th is the deadline. It's another shot clock that we're waiting to run out. Governor Youngkin, I'm a 50-50 coin flip on whether or not he vetoes this, or there's a couple other options as well. The one I'm least confident in is him signing it into law. But if the clock runs out April 8th, things move forward. We're looking at not a ballot initiative coming in November, but instead we're looking more at all these medical dispensaries flipping to rec sales in May 25.
That should be interesting. April 8th. Yes. And 2 days later, we will be in Washington, D.C., talking to lots of political leaders. Again, leave comments below. Let us know any questions that you want asked. But we're looking forward to that. But here's hoping we get positive news and no news, really, because that's positive news in both Florida and Virginia. All right. That concludes segment number 1, Into the Wire, highlighting the biggest headlines in cannabis and all other emerging industries. Let's now queue up. It's Mondays, MSOS Mondays. Here we go, Mitch. Good day, sir. How are things? Happy Monday. Good to see you. I know it's been a lot of, we always say this every Monday, a lot has changed since we last spoke to you, but really, I mean it this time, this past 7 days, a lot did change. A lot of price action, some crazy speeches mentioned in Washington, but I don't even know where to begin, but I guess we'll start with Blumenauer and his speech. I don't know if you got a chance to see the talk or conversation we had with Don Murphy last night, but wow. Was that not like it's about time when you saw that speech?
Yeah, it was good stuff. I liked his speech, but with the caveat, it's still a
Okay.
politician yelling at other politicians to be politicians. So
My
I
man's
liked
got a
everything he
point.
said, but the man's yelling at his own party. Let's get some things done here.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but I liked it. I don't think it really changes anything except more positive momentum, more
yeah.
pressure. It's just kind of a compound thing. Now, to back up to what else you just said, yeah, lots changed in the past week. I remember we thought everything was great again after the vice president's meeting and all this stuff. And I said, there's still going to be a lot of volatility. There's still going to be a
Yeah.
lot of ups and downs and negativity, everything else. And here we are. Although we think everything still looks good for the future, there are, false flags out there and a bunch of red in the market today.
It's just
So, I
amazing what a
mean,
little bit of
Dan,
positive news
talking,
does for the space. Go ahead.
yeah, talking about last week, I mean, Friday was probably one of the crazier days I've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Not getting into any individual names, but I mean, we saw the Canadian LPs were cranking multiple 10% to the upside. I mean, what do you think drove that? I mean, you think it was kind of like a short squeeze, excise tax news paired with Germany in the market,
Yeah.
or just they were catching a bid? And I mean, liquidity's hitting them because the cannabis story is getting bigger and they happen to be on those major exchanges.
Yeah, a
Or
lot of people
everything.
chatter a little of everything. A lot of people chatter about short squeeze, but short squeeze is a unicorn that hardly ever actually happens.
Yeah.
So a couple of those names that moved the most on Friday, they got a little bit of AMC in them. They got a little bit of GameStop in them. They're meme stocks, and if you zoom out a year, oh my God, that stock's still down 95%. So hey, traders, trade away, have a good time. Hope you're on the right side of it. But it's different than investing and trying to say that one is better than the other. I find myself, too often probably people think that I'm anti-LP and rah for MSOs, like my hat here. But our fund YOLO, it holds most of those Canadian LPs. Some I avoid, some I greatly underweight that I don't think are great long-term investments by a long shot. But hey, they're there for a reason, because on a day like Friday, they're listed on NASDAQ. When there's some headlines, they can rip. They sure as hell can. So doesn't mean they're great long-term investments, and thus we see a little bit of a pullback today in those names.
Yeah.
Do you think, not to get too speculative, but I mean, keying on that liquidity, the access to liquidity that you kind of just mentioned, do you think that they would run hotter than their U.S. counterparts if we were to get a Schedule 3 announcement?
It depends on what time frames we're talking about, Anthony. On any given day, possibly.
Yeah, possibly that day.
And it's not just the liquidity of being on exchanges, because in the past year we got TerraSend listed on the Toronto, and then we got Curaleaf listed on the Toronto. That's a major worldwide exchange that shares information with NASDAQ and NYSE, and nothing happens automatically. And the real big reason is, hey, if you're out for drinks with friends or at a dinner party or something like that, and somebody says, hey, cannabis stocks, they're not talking about Curaleaf and Green Thumb and Verano. They're still talking about, 4 years ago I invested in Aurora. Is that the one we're talking about? So no, it's the major exchange, but it's name recognition, and it's the runs that we've all been through already for I don't know how many years now has it been since
Yeah, it's
Canada
been a while.
legalized, and remember that the biggest run was in the year before legalization. As soon as it got
I know.
announced in Canada, that was the real run.
Down.
Once they started sales in Canada, it's been a slow death. So I heard you guys on the show earlier talking about fixing the
reality set
excise
in.
and so on. That's all good. Yeah.
Reality set
Lots of
in
room
once
for
that became.
improvement. Yeah,
It
is.
reality
You're
definitely
right.
set in back. That was October of 2018, if I'm correct. It's been probably almost like 5.5 years since it. Yeah, but I remember as soon as that went legal, I was talking to guys that were 3-4 weeks prior to it, and they're like, "We're getting out because crazy valuations." Once everything went live, you suddenly realized that the demand wasn't what everybody thought it was going to be, and like you said, it's been tough sledding obviously up in Canada for quite some time, but. Regardless, it blows my mind away. But still, name recognition, $250,000. What was that? Was it 250 million that was traded today? Anthony, you said
Canopy, dollar weighted average traded about $250 million worth of stock.
Tilray was over 100 million. Wow.
Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up. Go ahead, Guap.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I could speak in metaphors for a second, as I like to do, the way I explain it to people, the LPs and trying to trade them versus, the not financial advice, it's just a metaphor. I think the LPs feel like beach break. If you're a surfer, the wave that crashes on the beach is called beach break. It's quick, right? You get picked up, and then if you don't bail in time, you get thrown down. The people who are investing in MSOs are out where the sandbar is or past it, waiting for the big one, and it's a nice longer ride that doesn't have such a nasty end. Perhaps that's my cautionary tale on that. But I did have a question for you, Dan. Do you remember a point in time where we're getting more signals from DC? And by signal, I mean number of times cannabis is mentioned. Don't focus on the words, but from the president to the vice president, the Treasury Secretary, Secretary of HHS, the 250 pages. I mean, all the congressmen coming out. It just feels to me, and I've been watching this space very closely for 3-4 years now, that it's on their lips like every other day.
Yeah, no, never as much as we had right now. And we thought we had a ton of momentum back in December,
Right.
A year and 4 months ago, or 3 months ago,
More
December
than that.
22. But no, compared to that, there's so much more. But we still got this thing that we've been talking about for months now is it's the PTSD. It's how many times we've taken a gut punch with promises out of Washington, expectations, all that stuff. So that's why it's really tough to get buying momentum in our stocks, and thus we have a red day like today. And but no, Guap, I think you're absolutely correct that really there's nothing changed. So I don't know why the hell we're having such a red day today, and unless it's Tom Angel's sensationalist headlines out of marijuana moment. Sorry, he blocked me now because
he blocked me. He blocked me too. The shitty, the shit he puts out now is. I'm not going to get into it.
It's ridiculous. And the guy makes a career over the last 20 years off of marijuana, but he thinks no one else should make money off of it. So he hates people that invest in the space. So he thinks, he doesn't grow it, he doesn't sell it, he writes headlines on it, but thinks, oh well, I shouldn't go down that path. Excuse me, guys. Sorry, but it rubbed me the wrong way.
I'm still not blocked, and I appreciate his reporting. But yeah, I hear you. Sometimes
it was funny.
The communication strategy in me says stop talking. They say stop.
Hey, do headlines like that make stocks go down today? I don't know.
They do.
I do not know. But it was a negative headline. It's bullshit.
I would be willing to bet. I'd be willing to bet they do. And then if you actually look, someone fact checked it on that GOP committee. And out of, I think, the 23 or 24 members, 5 of them voted no on SAFE. And out of those 5, I think 3 of them actually voted yes for the marijuana research
You're right.
Yikes.
Yep,
policy.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, hey, I'm usually a glass half full kind of guy. So let's go back to glass half full. Nothing has changed fundamentally in Washington with with what we have going on with HHS and the DEA, with the White House mentioning it. With all those things, I think we're still in the same path.
Yeah.
Tea leaves.
Yeah, well said. Like some of the people providing feedback saying right now that what you guys had to be said needed to be said. Writes KJ Gear. John M. Hecht writes, P.S. Nancy Mace flipped on cannabis. I'm not sure what that means, but
No, that's the bullshit headlines, because she was part of that committee. But what Anthony said, when you look under the hood of that committee, Nancy Mace is a yes vote. So don't be misled with false information out there. Anybody, Nancy Mace is a big proponent. She's a member of that committee. That committee as a whole did not put out this negative piece that got amplified out there on social media today. So once again,
it was the same. Yeah.
The White House is the same. The DEA is the same. We have more momentum in the Congress right now. Don Murphy will tell you about it. Go ahead, Shad.
I was going to say, I got some interesting news to tell you. We actually got back feedback from Nancy Mace's team. She has confirmed that she is going to come on her podcast, which is amazing. So we are actually meeting with her communications team this week to set up a time. But, for all of our viewers out there, we are making headway with a lot of big decision makers from Washington. But Nancy Mace, we hope to have her on probably in the next 2 weeks during recess, but we hope to have her on later this week. We'll keep you guys updated, but her team has confirmed. And our good friend Rob Seacrest over at Ploris Capital Group was the main beneficiary for setting up that interview. He was with Nancy actually at the Bill Maher show a couple weeks ago, and he was been the main contributor to set that up. Cool. So Anthony and I, along with Rob and Nancy Mace, will give you updated on when we're going to have her on. So we'll get the true facts and information from the horse's mouth when we have her on, but that'll be interesting to say the least. Also wanted to bring up, it's going to be great. Submersive Capital, LGLZ, the latest cannabis ETF that is no more. See everybody smirking and smiling here. This was only a matter of time before this came to fruition, but got to get your opinion on this, Dan. What you think of that?
Well, it was a tiny fund, and I'm not surprised at all that it's going away. But hey, it's an example that this business isn't easy. AdvisorShares, we have 17 funds still. I don't know if all of them are going to survive. It's when you're below a certain amount of assets, we're not making a penny off of a fund. We're paying out of pocket to keep a fund above water, and trying to get to a point where it can be above break even and exist. But if you look at the cannabis landscape, last week our fund MSOS got some what's called creation units in the ETF space, some inflows. MSOX got some creation units, some inflows. No other cannabis ETFs did. I can't speak for the week before, but we haven't had any redemption units out of any of our funds so far this calendar year. We've had inflows, but we're getting some inflows. It's really, really tough out there to have other funds in this space. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some others fall by the wayside in the next year or two, because MSOS has $1 billion in it. I think it's going to keep growing. We have a lot of expectations in it to keep growing, and makes it tough for competitors.
I do want to bring up as well, we've had a lot of feedback from our viewers that have brought up Village Farms over the past week or so. And Ron writes, like to ask Dan about the recent increase bringing Village Farms to the top of YOLO, one of your other ETFs. But a lot of positive feedback, people mentioning a few things about this company over the past week to 2 weeks. And apologies to all of our viewers out there for some of you that follow closely and I've missed this, but I'd like to learn a little bit more and, again, answer the question that Ron has for you.
We've always loved Village Farms, and if it's increased in its position, that's just from
Yep.
performance. It's
Yeah.
so the top holding in our fund YOLO is the fund MSOS. So you have to kind of look under the hood of that. That's just a way to have all the U.S. exposure of the MSOs in one place. And once again, I will say we waive the fees, so we're not double dipping on two funds. But then the other largest funds, or holdings, in YOLO are Village Farms and High Tide. I very strongly think they're two very different operators, but definitely I think they're best in class in Canada. And we do own some Canopy. I liked owning Canopy on Friday, but it's way underweighted. It's really down towards the bottom of the fund. Tilray comparatively is underweighted. It's also in the fund. Aurora Cannabis isn't in there at all. I think that's still a dumpster fire. I don't care what anybody says. But that's the thing about active management. It's not very active. We're not flipping these holdings around. We're not trading it heavily. Active management simply means it's not an index. So we feel good to own a lot more Village Farms and than we own of Tilray, and certainly more Village Farms than we have of Canopy. If you actually look at the sales of Village Farms and their market share in Canada, they've been a real strong producer. Very, high-rated flower. People seem to like it. They got a great facility in British Columbia where they grow. Sometimes their vegetable business has actually hurt them in quarterly earnings. So for those of you that don't know this,
yes,
the reason that they were able to succeed so well when others were struggling and overgrowing
because of that.
and growing moldy weed that they had to destroy and all this stuff, Village Farms were already experts in greenhouse growing of cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes and everything else. They were already serious experts in greenhouse growing, and they took that expertise and turned it on to cannabis. So we're always been big fans of Village Farms. It's only in YOLO because it's Canada. It's not an MSOs.
And the produce that they produce, these are contracts with some of the biggest chains in North America, like the Costco's and Myers of the world. So yes, a lot of expertise to say the least. But that makes a very valid point. Lots of feedback coming in right now, but we got some SNDL people questioning about High Tide being your darling of Canada. I'm sure that'll bring on some healthy competition and some banter back and forth amongst the investor base. But what else?
Sundial's in there. It's in the top 10 holdings. We have more of Sundial than we do of Tilray as well. So that's I'd call that overweight fans.
Yeah. We had Raj Grover on last week. He's an interesting guy, sharp as a razor, and done a lot of good things for that company right now, but he knows the retail space. But one thing he did outline is that he's coming into the U.S. market and has it fixated on there. But he's done an incredible job at building out the right retail model in Western Canada and now doubling basically the license amounts in the province of Ontario from 75 to 150. But a good story that he's building north of the border, right?
Certainly. So, and I like what's going to potentially happen with the excise tax in Canada. For a program that's been mismanaged so badly by the provincial governments in Canada. I don't know. Dare I say it's a little bit like New York? No, New York's a whole lot worse. But Canada has lots of upside. No, they have lots of upside to fix what they have. And the operators like Village Farms and High Tide have navigated it well. So cheers to them.
Yeah. When you say there's tremendous upside in Canada, very few players are going to be left in comparison to where it was 6, 7, 8 years ago. But is that the main reason in itself why there's so much upside pertaining to those 2 or 3 companies? I don't want to say 2 or 3, but a limited amount.
Well, what's that saying? You get rid of something else, get rid of the chaff. Yeah, they need to get rid of a bunch of those companies, and there's a bunch of crappy operators. I always said that the entire Canadian market was kind of like the size of one state in the U.S. when you look at the actual consumers. So the best ones are going to survive. they do have the ability to already do business in Germany and so on, where most other companies do not. And there's going to be a few good survivors, but fixing the excise tax is a big boost to their bottom line for those good operators. So no, is Canada ever going to have the upside that the U.S.? No. Even if we get some federal reform in the U.S., do all these Canadian operators get to immediately come into the U.S.? Not really. They could try to buy their way in. They can make deals, but they don't have licenses. They don't have boots on the ground in the U.S. But from where they are now, fixing that excise tax is going to be a boost to their bottom line.
Happy glass. I first heard of Aurora from a guy who said he had a pump and dump he was going to ride the craze with. Yeah.
I hope that worked out for you.
Yeah, no kidding, right? All right, sir. Well, listen, a little bit slower news day on the news front with the overall industry, but that's okay. We've had some incredible guests on, including yourself every Monday, but make sure that you log on. We'll keep you posted on that Nancy Mace interview, but that should be rather interesting. Let us know if there's any questions, Mr. Ahrens, that you would like us to ask her, and we'll fire away. But as usual, always appreciate you checking in every Monday.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll see you next week. Interesting, huh? But yeah. All right,
Dan's
gents.
Dan's words use the word dumpster fire. It's
we should have he'll never agree to it, but we should have a dumpster fire of the week by Dan Ahrens as a segment, just spotlighting his least favorite company.
Yeah,
Just
that would
kidding.
actually get a
Don't
lot.
Don't do it, Dan. Don't do it, Dan.
Dumpster fire with Alan Brockstein every Monday.
There you go.
That's terrible.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, gents. Appreciate obviously all of our viewers reaching out here today. And as usual, as I said, we'll have some pretty interesting interviews going on later this week, hopefully early part of next week as we continue our trek towards Washington later next month in Washington. So lots of moving parts going on right now as there's more and more positive sentiment related to this industry. As usual, smash that like button, leave lots of comments below. More obviously feedback that we get, the more chances this picks up within YouTube's algorithms and we take this viral. As usual, make sure to log on to the dalesreport.com and subscribe to our daily newsletter called The Baked In. Lots of interesting information based on the price action the last couple of days. And we'll have some takes on that related to the rest of the week with our podcast and our newsletter first thing tomorrow morning. So log on to thedalesreport.com and subscribe to the Baked In newsletter. Anthony, Guap, appreciate your time. We'll check back with you guys on Wednesday.
Talk soon, guys.
All righty. If you set fire to the forest, only the strongest trees survive.
Hey, everyone. So what'd you think of the video? Leave your comments below and let us know your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. As usual, subscribe to our channel by clicking on the link here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click on the link here and click on that bell for all notifications. Because most importantly, we want to know your feedback because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.